You mentioned DSV, and I want to circle back to that. But on the focus for international for the moment, could you talk to what a potential international partnership might look like? What would be the parameters or the construct of a potential partnership?
Sure, I can talk about what it looks like internationally and then in Canada, because they're slightly different. So in Canada, we implement the projects ourselves, but internationally, it's more of a licensing agreement. So we would find a partner who wishes to be a drone operator in their local market. So it could be a large airline, it could be a large freight forwarder, or somebody in the logistics space, somebody where this is a good fit for what they're doing today, and a natural extension of what they're doing. And they're obviously well connected with the regulator, well connected to be able to market this opportunity within their local market. Oh, that's my phone ringing. So sorry, it could be a customer.
It's a good sign.
Exactly, it's always ringing. It's good. So it's a licensing agreement with a partner, and the way it would work is the initial phase would be more of, I would say, an engineering engagement with them to get them certified as an operator in their local country, get the drones type approved as aircraft in their local country. So there would be an engineering engagement that they would pay us for to get that process going. We envision the first few projects that they get with their customers, they're going to want us to implement them so we can train them to implement future projects themselves. So the first 2, 3, 4, 5 projects we would implement with them, watching and learning for what we're doing as part of the training process, and they would obviously pay us for that as well. And then once they're up and running with a few small customers, then there would be an ongoing licensing fee. It's a 7-digit licensing fee for them to benefit from the use of our system and the technology we've developed and the intellectual property that we have. And then there's also a managed service, similar to what we have in Canada. We are the back end of the system, monitoring the drones and the routes as everything is running. And that's a fee-based managed service that they would pay us for every route and every drone that's flying internationally. So slightly different structure than what we have in Canada, because it's more of a licensing deal. Not exactly a franchise, but you could look at it as a kind of a franchise model where we're enabling somebody else to be the operator in their local market. So.
And would it be fair to talk to some of the countries where there has been expressed interest in a partnership?
Sure. So we are in active discussions in a number of countries, United States, obviously, India, Israel, a few countries in Africa, Europe, of course. So we are having, and Middle East as well. So we are in I would say, fairly advanced conversations in some of those countries, and rather optimistic that we'll see something happening in the next little while. That's what we expect. Again, part of the licensing model. So we're very excited to have good traction in Canada, but also to be branching out internationally in a very controlled way, but branching out internationally as part of our natural progression as we grow. And the business is really designed from the beginning as a scalable international business. So this has all been part of the original plan and the original design of the business, the business model, the operations control center, and these sort of things. So,
And the Air Canada name resonates with investors. I don't think DSV has the same panache with investors. Could you perhaps talk to the scope of its reach and what that could evolve into?
Yeah, so DSV is maybe not as well known by the average person on the street, but within the logistics field, and certainly within Europe, where they're based in Denmark, they're well known, and they are a very large, multi-billion-dollar global logistics company, one of the top in the world for sure. And we signed them as a customer for the first route, which has been operating since Q1 of this year when revenue started. They were our first revenue customer. We've been doing hundreds of flights a month with them very successfully. We recently announced a second route with them, which is going to be from their very large 1.2 million square foot facility in Milton, Ontario, off-site to a couple of their customers, moving healthcare products, including some COVID-19 related healthcare products. And the first route was with the Sparrow between two drone spot depots. The second route is exciting because it's going to be our first route with the recently announced Sparrow cargo drop functionality, where we leave DSV, we fly to a location where there's very minimal infrastructure. We reduce altitude and drop an untethered load and without landing, and then fly back to DSV. So we're excited about that. It's a 3.5-kilometer route. It's helping DSV service a couple of the customers. It's going to be flying over the 401, which is the busiest road in the world. So we're excited about being able to do that as well. And we're very excited about other potential routes with DSV in Canada and globally. I mean, they're really a great customer for us because they're very innovative. They're really a thought leader in logistics. They want to move forward in terms of being able to take care of their customers and be responsive to new technology and new customer needs. And they're very scalable for us because of their size and their global operation. So very excited to be partnering with DSV.
Okay. And domestically, you secured a contract with Moose Cree some time ago that was slower in unfolding due to funding issues. In contrast, and I wanted to highlight the contract announcement with Beausoleil, and how quickly you've been able to, or you will be able to bring that to market. If you could just talk to the two situations.
So Moose Cree First Nation, there were a couple of funding sources from the government, federally and provincially. We do have approval, we announced a while ago, for the provincial aspect of the funding from the government of Ontario. We are waiting for the federal government to provide the balance of the funding. There's a number of things they've requested that we're providing to them, just some basic information. Obviously, it's been a little delayed, as you mentioned. They're still very keen on the project. I was in Ottawa, I think it was maybe February of this year before the pandemic started, when we could all fly, and got very warm reception from the folks I met in Ottawa with the federal government. They like the project. They're still keen on moving forward. So we're optimistic that we'll get approval on that probably in Q4 of this year. So a little delayed, but certainly looking forward to moving forward. With the Beausoleil project, Beausoleil First Nation, which is from the mainland to Christian Island, which is part of the Beausoleil First Nations community just near Midland, Ontario. The way we structured it was very different. We partnered with Global Medic, who was a not-for-profit humanitarian organization in Canada that also operates globally. And they, working with us and a number of partners, were able to secure some non-government financing. The largest of those contributors was OEC, another very large logistics company. And through OEC and a number of partners, they were able to secure funding to then have Global Medic engage us to put this system in place for Beausoleil. And the benefit, this is the First Nations community, there's the benefit to them is they want to limit person-to-person contact, that other use case that I mentioned, to prevent the virus from coming onto the island. The issue with First Nations communities is they are particularly susceptible to these pandemics because they have poor healthcare infrastructure, unfortunately. They often have greater underlying healthcare issues like diabetes, high blood pressure, tuberculosis, and these sort of things, which puts them particularly at risk. So we all saw this opportunity to help the community, limit person-to-person contact, limit the pandemic coming onto the island, but keeping the supply chain open. So a different financing structure, and it was through Global Medic, and with OEC as the largest funder. So that will probably be live and flying, I would say, third or fourth week of July. So this month. So it's imminent. We're very excited about that one.
Very good. Now, you walked us through some of the broad parameters for an international partnership. Could you do the same domestically in terms of what is, I know there's a range, but what would be a representative term of contract, what would be the recoupment plan for initial capital within the contract, upfront capital being repaid, and then also the aspect of retained ownership of those assets?
Sure. So there's a few questions there. So I'll start in reverse order. I'll start in reverse order. So in Canada, unless the customer is a airline, we're going to be the operator, meaning we still own the assets, we own the drone spots, we own the drones, and these sort of things. So it's sold as a managed service. So we're not just selling somebody a piece of hardware or a piece of software, and they're off on their own. It's a managed service, kind of like a lease, but not exactly like a lease. So the typical deal structure in Canada, they're slightly different than internationally, because we're the operator, we own the assets, and we implement the project. There's an upfront payment, as you mentioned, which typically would cover 100% of the implementation costs, things like any engineering work, any engineers and labor in the field to install and test and commission the system, any kind of flights, hotel and food, or rental car if it's a remote project outside of this area. So that's typically covered with an upfront payment, and also part of that upfront payment would be a large percentage of the capital. It's not really a capital intensive business, but there are some drone spot depots and battery chargers and the drones itself and that sort of thing. So typically a large portion of that is covered and marked up, obviously, is covered in the upfront payment as well. And then there's a monthly fixed payment, which would recover the balance of the capital, also marked up. It's hard to say what a typical deal is. We've got deals that are 6 months, and there's other deals that could be 3, 4, 5 years that we're quoting on. So if you assume a 3-year deal as an example, we would certainly recover the balance, the small balance of the capital, well within those 3 years, as part of a fixed fee that covers the capital, also the managed service as part of that fixed fee, the second component. The third component would then be a small variable monthly fee, typically tied to the number of flights, which could include things like any kind of cargo insurance that the customer may optionally want, or any kind of specialized insurance, or any kind of specialized hours of operation that might be unique to their project. So there could be that third component of a variable monthly fee. And then the fourth and final component of a Canadian deal is a decommissioning fee at the end of the project. So as an example, if it were a 3-year project and the customer chose not to renew at the end of the 3-year project, there would be a decommissioning fee for us to remove the equipment, uninstall everything, and then we would actually then be able to redeploy that capital at another customer, because the drone spots, the battery management system, the drones, they definitely have a shelf life, or definitely have a usable life a lot longer than 3 years. So we can redeploy the capital to another customer, even though it's been paid for a few times over by the first customer. So those are typically the 4 components of a Canadian deal. Hard to really say what the value is, because it varies from one extreme to the other. Hard to really say what the duration of a typical deal is. That also varies depending on the use case and application. But those are typically the 4 components of the structure of a Canadian deal.
Sure. And just to perhaps paraphrase, so it would be fair to say that in terms of the initial outlay related to a contract, that would be recouped well within the term of the contract. And then at the end of the contract, you retain full ownership to those assets.
Correct. Absolutely correct. That's right. Yeah.
Would it also be fair to say that with respect to the initial outlay that was not covered in the upfront, there are alternative financing options available to you to cover off any capital needs with respect to what we see being a very aggressive ramp up in traction.
Yes, I mean, again, projects are typically not a very capital intensive endeavor. A lot of, again, depending on the geography, implementing a project in Vaughan where we are and implementing a project in the middle of the jungle in Congo are very different cost models because of the availability of transportation and getting there and hotels and cars and labor and these sort of things. But yeah, typically, even though it's not capital intensive, a large portion of the capital is covered up front. Once we get to a more regular cadence of projects and we're ramping up more quickly, then we have the option to do a sale and lease back of the capital. So we could hypothetically go to some large leasing company, sell all the capital to them, lease it back to them, lease it back from them, and then mark that lease up and resell that lease to the customer. So it would be an off-balance sheet lease versus an on-balance sheet project. Yeah.
Okay. And on the theme of an aggressive ramp up, could you talk to your ability to handle much heavier demand for drone deployment installations? Do you have the internal resources to smoothly ramp?
Yeah, so we have definitely built the business with scale and international operations in mind. So we do have I would say arrangements made with companies in Canada, in the GTA actually, in Ontario, that could do the manufacturing of the drones for us. We currently manufacture them in-house, but it is part of the plan to be able to outsource the manufacturing of the drones for scale in the future. So that plus the leasing that I mentioned, these are things that have from the very beginning been built into the commercial and operational design of the organization. So definitely those things are in the plan, and we look forward to the point where we're at that kind of scale and able to implement those plans.
Thank you. And I know people generally recognize the advantages of drones in terms of speed, in terms of reach. I think there's probably an underestimation of the cost advantages by virtue of labor efficiencies that you have in your model. Could you talk to how labor efficient you are with respect to the deliveries?
Certainly, I mean, it varies from customer to customer. In some cases, it's healthcare or it's government or military, where it's not necessarily a financial model. It's more a social benefit and a humanitarian benefit. Or in the case that it's an economic model, that varies too. If it's a logistics company, a courier company, typically last mile or first mile delivery can be 60% or more of the overall cost of a delivery. In the case of Canada Post, there are locations that they deliver to where they are losing money on those routes and they're losing money on those deliveries. So there's definitely a payback based on the last mile economics, and it's going to vary, but definitely the ongoing operating cost of an electric or even our larger gasoline powered Condor is very low compared to a truck and driver. Again, not that we intend to replace those on scale for the middle mile, but for the last mile and the first mile, it's very economical versus a truck and driver with very long windshield time to get to a remote community for a small number of deliveries. So it's very economical for that. If you look at commercial or industrial applications, typically they even have a greater ROI. If you look at mining or oil and gas, just given the nature of the size of the projects and the economics of a multi-billion-dollar project being down, the ROI can be very, very high, and they can recover the cost of the system, the fixed cost of the system plus the variable cost of the system in literally a few deliveries. I was in Chile last year in South America talking to some mining companies, and if you look at a large open pit mine, copper, gold, coal, whatever it happens to be, they have 10, 12, $15 million earth mover trucks, and they were telling me when one of those trucks is down and not operating, it's $250,000 per hour of downtime. So it doesn't take too many deliveries with a drone to get emergency repair parts to a piece of equipment at an open pit mine to pay for the system, versus somebody in a pickup truck that's got to take 2 hours to get across a mine where we could take 10 minutes. So the economics really vary from one extreme to the other, but typically it's a last mile ROI, or it's a very industrial ROI for large industrial oil and gas or mining type projects.
And if I could ask you a little bit about the competitive landscape, and I know people tend to paint it with one brush when there are huge differences within the marketplace. Can you talk to the consumer orientation of some versus business, and those who are going with proprietary solutions versus open-ended or agnostic?
Right. So it's a good question, because there are a lot of people, I would say, dabbling in the market, and there's a lot of very cool YouTube videos and a lot of cool websites with computer graphics and that sort of thing. But when you peel away the onion, there aren't really too many true operators, I would say. And mentioned a couple of things that differentiate us from a lot of our I wouldn't even say competitors. I don't want to sound naive or arrogant, but I wouldn't even say competitors, just other people that are in the space. I mean, our focus from the beginning was really a systems approach. We're not a drone company, contrary to the name. We're really a systems approach and a managed service. So the benefit to us is that we've got a lot more breadth and depth into what we can do, the use cases that we can address, because we've got smaller drones like the Sparrow, but then all the way up to the Condor, which can take 180 kilograms and 400 pounds of payload, which is not typical in the market. I mean, there really isn't anybody who has that kind of capability. So the fact that we've got a multi-fleet system, the fact that it's a system approach, the fact that it's all our intellectual property, and then, as you mentioned, our system is also airframe agnostic, meaning I can put our system and our flight FLYTE system on somebody else's drone. So you may see an announcement from another company who's developed and launched a large cargo drone. It's not necessarily a competitor. I mean, they could be a vendor to us, and we put our system on their aircraft and integrate it into our system, and now offer that to our customers. So again, they're not really competitors necessarily, but since our system is airframe agnostic, we can also put it on a fixed wing manned aircraft. So we could take a manned cargo airplane and put our system on it, and now we've got that as an extension to our fleet as well. We could also put it on a manned rotary wing helicopter. So hypothetically, we could put our system on a military helicopter, and now the military has a drone platform, a very large, heavy lift, long distance drone platform for use in front lines. So the ability to scale our system, to integrate other airframes into our system in the future, and there are a number that we're working on, and then really the focus on the system approach and the depot to depot approach is very different than a lot of our competitors. We see others that are really focused on a very, very niche application, very, like moving blood in Africa, which is it's a great application, but it's very, very niche in its approach and what it can do. Or other companies who have a drone that's very short range, very small payload, 4 or 5 pounds and that sort of thing. It's great for a niche application, but really no breadth, no depth, and not really scalable. So those are really the big differences between us and others, I would say. And these are not my words. I hear this from other regulators in other countries and other people that we talk to, and from Air Canada, who did their due diligence on the industry before they signed the agreement with us. They say that we're probably 2 to 3 years ahead of anybody else in the space, just given the way we've approached the system approach to the overall solution.
And as much as you are open to operating with different devices, you do have considerable IP around that software platform, I understand.
Right. So all of the intellectual property is ours for the components of the system. We have 2 patents. We received one last year in July, I think it was, for the overall system. That was a very large patent to secure, and we're happy we got it. We received another one, I think it was April of this year, really for our depot-to-depot, drone spot-to-drone spot methodology. There are about 8 more patents that are pending, and there's a few other cool things that we're working on that will probably apply for patents in the next little while. So definitely intellectual property and patents are a big part of our assets and our ability to not only protect our solution, but also to really be an innovator and a thought leader and bring new technology and new functionality to the market.
Very good. And Michael, before we close off, is there anything that you would like to convey? Any question that you had anticipated or you would like to fill in?
Well, I would really say, anybody who's looking at the industry or potentially looking at the industry as an investment, or particularly looking at us as an investment, I mean, of course, do your due diligence. We are in an industry that I think is very clearly not a fad. It's very clearly an industry that is at an inflection point that is about to take off, I guess, no pun intended. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the pandemic is a bad thing and a horrible thing, and we wish it didn't happen. But it has certainly raised the profile of the industry and created a lot more use cases. So definitely this is an industry that will see exponential growth in the next little while. So we're very excited about that. And we've really crossed the inflection point ourselves. We're no longer a startup. We're generating revenue, fully commercialized, fully operational, signing customers, implementing customers. So really we're at that point where we expect to see strong growth, not just in the industry, but for our business as well. So it's a very exciting time for us, and people can do their own due diligence, but it's definitely something that people have the opportunity to get in on early and benefit from that.
Very good. Well, Michael, I would like to thank you for your time and for your perspectives. It's always a great dialogue, and I always learn so much more about the space. And I continually find reinforcement for our positive view. So with that, Michael, we thank you and wish you all the best.
Thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it. It's a great story to tell, so I always enjoy telling everybody what we're up to. Thanks very much.
Very good. Take care.